Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how you doing today?
Good, Bruce. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, compliments of the season to you. You got to check out my Grinch tree that I got here.
Oh, that's what that is.
See, he's got an Oilers logo and
I
everything.
like
They're
it.
all
I like it.
blue and orange and copper and you know and Grinchy, just kind of to keep the
Okay.
keep the local tradition going, I guess. Oh,
Today on the Cult of Hockey podcast, Bruce will answer 6 questions in total. And we're starting out with what was your best surprise of the 21-22 season to date? Best surprise, Bruce.
yeah, that's. I'm going to kind of be winging this. I just got in the door, but I think I'll have to go with Stuart Skinner being a pleasant surprise in terms of being a lot more NHL ready than he was a year ago, and bringing, quality net mining. Maybe the team hasn't quite had the results that they should have when he's been in net, because sometimes the team hasn't played that well in front of him. But Skinner himself has been just fine, and may represent an internal solution to a position of need, which has been a desperate, well, it's been a shortcoming of the organization as a whole, is to bring in these internal developing players into positions that they need. And Skinner looks like he may be one.
I agree. Great surprise. He was, as recently, I think, as this summer, when his name came up on Oilers Now, and someone might want to fact check me on this, but I think on Oilers Now, the word has been for some time they don't really see an internal solution long term in net for the organization. Like they don't see within the prospect pool someone who's going to step up and be the number one D-man one day, and they got it. They now have that person. There's a general consensus that Stuart Skinner next year, of all 3 of these goalies, he's the one you want on the Oilers for sure. And we'll see who the other one is. We'll see if it's Mike Smith, if he can come back or not. But Stuart Skinner, he's one of them, and we'll find out, excuse me, who the other one is. So,
well, it's very nice that he's one of them at a cap hit of 750,000. I think he's at the minimum, and he signed for 2 years. So they really got him. That could really help resolve a major headache that they have on the salary cap front. That they could, if he's deemed good to go, that's major cap savings on the current arrangement of Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen that are $6.7 million cap hit between them. Well, Mike Smith and Stuart Skinner as a tandem would be just under $3 million. Like that's just a massive savings, and that might help them resolve the Jesse Puljujärvi conundrum.
indeed, my best surprise has been Cody Ceci. He signed a excuse me, a 4-year deal at $3.25 million. And I was worried. I hadn't seen him play, but the word out of Toronto and Ontario was so negative about the player that it just made me wonder, oh, geez. And the other thing that had me worried versus a little decade of darkness PTSD with defensemen. I mean, how many times did the Oilers bring in a veteran free agent defenseman and that defenseman fall on his face or trade for one? So, the quick list, Mark Fane, Curtis Foster, Nikita Nikitin, Andrew Ference, Nick Schultz. A lot of guys there that just did not, in the end, come through for the Edmonton Oilers. So I was worried more, more of the same with Cody Ceci. And what I've seen instead is a defenseman who is at least earning, he's at least value on that contract this year. He's only 27, so, that's a good age for a defenseman. So looking forward for 4 years, if he can consistently keep playing the way he is, he's taking top 4 minutes, and he's consistently playing strong defense, and his offense is just fine as well. All of the concerns that I heard out of Toronto and Ottawa, I'm not seeing that player in the least. Someone who made the big mistake, someone who was erratic out there. Not at all. And he's playing a fairly tough competition as well. So Cody Ceci to me has been a very important surprise and the best surprise because of the length of his contract and what it would have meant for the Oilers if he doesn't come through, if he didn't come through, it would have been a real problem with Adam Larsson, especially leaving. That would have been massive, but he has stepped up big time.
Yeah, he's a nice ad at a fairly reasonable price. I mean, he got a reset last year in Pittsburgh at a low contract, and he was never going to get renewed at that price for any length of time. However, because he had a very good year in Pittsburgh, and whether he's just matured as a player, or whether it's a case of Ottawa and Toronto fans being Canadian hockey fans, set the bar very high at what they expect and don't take mistakes lightly. There are high demands for playing in Canada, and I think that holds in any market. We certainly see it here at times, but now he's 27 years old and he's got all that experience behind him, good and bad, in Ottawa and elsewhere, and I think we're getting the heart of his career. So in that sense, it's that looks to be a player who's going to be able to help this team and sort of the second pairing or leading the third pairing role over the next 4 years. And at that price, that's that's not over the top at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like in Pittsburgh last year, the verbal was really good. Like what people wrote about Cody Ceci out of Pittsburgh last season, they consistently strong reviews. So I'm not sure if he got a bit of a bad ride in Toronto and maybe in Ottawa, kind of for the on ice analytics analysis. You might agree with this. I think Chris Russell has gotten way too much criticism based on a few on ice numbers where he doesn't stack up very well. And I don't actually think those numbers represent his overall play very well. And he's better than what they suggest. And I'm curious if that also happened with CC in Toronto and maybe in Ottawa. But again, I don't know. I didn't see him play in those cities, so I can't say. That's just a hunch. But in Pittsburgh, because he did have weaker on ice analytics in Toronto and Ottawa. Pittsburgh, he actually had pretty good on ice analytics if you go by that. But when you see across the board all kinds of hockey observers who go by those numbers and who don't put so much weight in them, saying he was good last year, if I had dug a little bit more deeply at the time of the signing into those, what those people had to say, I might have been more bullish on his signing at the time, but he's certainly come through. Bruce, we are now in your worst surprise. So it can't be a disappointment, but worst surprise.
Yeah. Well, they do kind of overlap, surprise and disappointment, don't they? I mean, what you were expecting versus what you're getting.
Yes.
And I was expecting more from some of the off-season signings. And I will say, just to take a little bit of the edge off to start, we're seeing some very positive trends from these guys just in the last little while. But I'll say Derek Ryan, Warren Fogle were guys that when they came in, they were, brought in to really strengthen the third line. And the third line was in the tank for a better part of 20 games there. They had a few good games at the start. And they, again, had a couple of good games last week, just as the team was trying to pull itself out of that 6-game losing streak. But the overall contribution of the bottom six, well, I guess you can't say that as a surprise because that's been a constant story on this team for many years. But it was supposed to get better, and instead it has actually trended worse this year, and that's not the kind of surprise one wants to have happen.
All right, I'm just looking up some numbers for my worst surprise here. So just give me 1 second. And what do we got going on here? They don't seem to be the numbers that I want. I'm looking for points per 60 at even strength. Because I guess my worst surprise, Bruce, I see what I did wrong, is the Dynamite line. Yeah. I expected that line, if they got a real run of games together, to be strong to really crush it. Now, I think actually they're, if I'm not mistaken, I think their goals plus minus might not be that bad. But
Hasn't been good lately, but
is that
overall it's pretty good because they did come out of the gate hot. They were on a so-called PDO heater for a
okay?
while, and then
So Leon Draisaitl has been fantastic. At even
Mhm.
strength, he has 3.09 points per 60, which is, if you're over 3, you're essentially a superstar at even strength, superstar attacker in the NHL. McDavid's at 306. Puljujärvi 2.54. Zach Kassian, he's 2.09, surprisingly, pretty high number there. Hyman 1.92. If you're around 2, you're a strong top 6 forward in terms of point scoring. This is a small sample size, of course, early
Right.
in the year, and subject to change. But Bruce Yamamoto, after a really poor season, even strength scoring last year, and Nugent Hopkins, really poor season, even strength scoring this year, they're not improving. And Yamamoto's at 0.74.
Oh,
Nuge is at 1.3. So Yamamoto, now they're both, again, they're chipping in on more scoring grade A shots at even strength. So there's a bit of puck luck involved here, which is bad puck luck. Bruce, Yamamoto is a young player. He's not signed to a big deal. If he doesn't pan out, he doesn't pan out. Maybe he's going to turn it around in the second half of the season on the attack and do a lot better. Nuge is on first year of an 8-year deal. He's coming off a terrible even strength scoring season last year where he was even weaker. This is getting into, I'm worried about this country
mhm.
with Ryan Nugent Hopkins at even strength. His inability to break through as an effective attacker at even strength. This is a year and a half now. Now they're truncated. That last year was truncated, but this is a problem for the Edmonton Oilers. It's something that I thought would be rectified with different line mates. It really hasn't been. He's got to find a way to dig in and find a way to score more points at even strength. He's a big disappointment at even strength, and it's hidden somewhat by his absolutely spectacular play on the power play, where he regularly turns copper into gold. But at even strength, I don't know, Nooch. Like, figure it out. Like, he's got to figure out a way to put up more points, and it probably involves playing a harder game around the net. He's, the old adage about perimeter players. I think this applies. I think it's a fair comment on Ryan Nugent Hopkins, and he's going to have to change the style of his game to start creating more points. That's what I would say. All right, we are moving on to your favorite Oiler.
Yeah. We're not supposed to pick favorites, aren't we? Supposed to be like totally impartial in all this?
Well, we try to
Uh,
do when we rate the scoring chances, we have systems in place to correct for our bias. But I think to deny that we have favorite players is, well, for me, would be a lie. And
okay.
that's why we have the correction for bias. That's why we make it public, and you go over my work and I go over your work. And go ahead. Who's your favorite
Okay.
Oiler?
Well, as a fan blogger, I guess I'm allowed to be a fan. And
Yeah.
my favorite player, pretty much since he got here, is Leon Draisaitl. Always loved Leon's game. He brings a whole lot of things the team needs. So let's start with that. Putting the size down the middle, a little bit of swagger, a a tremendous versatility that he brings. His capacity to play center, either wing, either special team, either goalie out situation, overtime. Uh, he's a player, to do some of the grunt work like the Fogo role, face off, get off, because he's the best face off man on the team. They'll use him for the odd 10 or 15-second shift to just look after that aspect of things. And uh, but that aside, like the game that he brings, his ability to pass the puck forehand or backhand side, his capacity as a finisher, his ability to get down and dirty when the going gets rough, he can bring a little bit of that stuff himself, and just the overall massive package of skills that Draisaitl brings. Plus the fact I have him in my keeper league, so every point he scores is a point for me. So what's not to cheer for?
I'd say, Bruce, in terms of rating our grade A shots, if there's one player that we consistently disagree with the most, it's Leon Draisaitl, where I'm harder on him on defense and we often disagree if he's made a mistake on grade A shots. So it's good there's two of us doing it, is all I'm saying when it comes to Leon. And I'm not saying I'm right, but we often disagree.
His defensive game is it's part of what I guess, whether you're like man coverage or puck, he plays the puck. And he makes good plays on the puck, and he gets beat on the puck. And we do have moments where we clash on whether he's responsible or whether it's just also in frame or what the issues are. I think on the offensive side, we're basically in full agreement.
We always agree. And I love the player too. He is one of my favorite Edmonton Oilers hockey players. He is such a fantastic player. In fact, I've been saying since about the 10th game that he's the MVP of the Oilers so far this year. I'll hold to that. And that's saying a lot, of course, when you have Connor McDavid on the team. Who would you guess is my favorite player, Bruce? Can you guess?
Your favorite player on the Oilers? Well, I'm going to guess Chris Russell, David.
No, I do defend him. I do defend.
Well, we both do, actually.
Yeah, we both do. And so does Kurt Levens, our Cult of Hockey colleague. But it's not Chris Russell, although I see more good in his game than some do. My favorite, and I actually had a fairly hard time with this because I like a lot of the players. Yeah. There's a few that I don't like, but we'll get to that in a second. But I'm going to say, even though he has had his struggles this year, I tend to like the up-and-coming player. So I'm going to go with Evan Bouchard as my favorite player this year. He's someone I really do root for a lot, because I think he has such tremendous potential. But I also have a certain amount of fear around his game, in that I'm worried he's going to get swallowed up by a combination of factors, too many glaring mistakes at a young age, which he's had a number of them. But maybe there'll be some kind of Bruce, let me be blunt here. I think on-ice analytics do the worst job with defensemen. And they really mislead people and can lead to a lot of criticism of players that don't deserve it. So I'm worried that, and I haven't looked at his numbers. I think that actually been pretty good, his on-ice analytics numbers, which I'm glad, because I think that can lead to a lot of heat on a player. So, I saw it with Justin Schultz, where a very similar player got eaten up in Edmonton and, essentially run out of town. He ran out of chances with the fans, for sure. They were fed up with him. I wasn't. I liked the player. I saw what he could bring to the team. I wasn't surprised to see him succeed in Pittsburgh. So my fear I have this rooting interest in him not going down that path. I also think he's a better player than Justin Schultz. He's bigger. He's as good a skater. He's got a better shot. He's a better passer. He's a better player all around than Justin Schultz, who became a pretty good player. So I'm hopeful that he's going to develop into kind of a special player for the Oilers. And it's really important that he does, because the Oilers need more all-star defensemen. You just can't win. It's difficult to win with Darnell Nurse playing at a really high level, but really no one else. Like, you need some all-star defensemen. We need him to be our Shea Theodore, our Alex Pietrangelo, and he could develop into that player still. That's how much talent he has, and we'll see if that happens or not. We heard a good review of his game from Jim Playfair on the Spitting Chicklets podcast, which if you haven't listened to, I still may write up a summary of that. It was very interesting. Playfair's interview with Whitney and what's the guy, Bissonnette, the other host of that.
Nasty, yeah.
Yeah, Biz Nasty. They talked about Duncan Keith in interesting terms. Anyway, he's my favorite player.
What do they say about Duncan Keith?
They said something I didn't agree with, and I usually find myself agreeing with everything Jim Playfair says.
Mhm.
He says he watched the video of Duncan Keith last year and he noticed he wasn't getting involved in the attack. In fact, he had his skates turned the wrong way in the offensive zone as if he was going to like
Right.
head back to cover. Keith didn't even realize that. So they've worked a lot on getting him more involved in the offensive game. I agreed with that, and I've seen that, and I've really liked Keith's offensive play with the puck on his stick. But Playfair said he still sees him as really fast and agile from the like the ringette line down or the dots down. They don't have the ringette line in the NHL, but from the dots down in the NHL, like really fast and able to cover off on defense. And I
Right.
haven't seen that. I see some speeds. I see at least league average speed there and okay speed, but I'm seeing a lot of Duncan Keith getting beat below the dots in his own zone, and I'm not seeing out of this world agility down there. I'm seeing a player who's often a step behind the play. If I'm completely honest, I don't know if you see it the same way, Bruce. Maybe that's just me, but that's what
I
I'm
do.
seeing. So I disagreed with Playfair.
I used to see him as a player. You could shoot the puck behind him, and he'd just go and get it, make the turn in the corner, and come out clean with it. And I'm not seeing that player at the advanced age that he is now. And I think he can be beat with wide speed, and he's if you get the puck behind him, you can if not beat him to the puck, at least saw off and then create a puck battle. It's not like he just comes out clean like we seemed to in Chicago. Shoot the puck into Keith's corner, and the next thing you knew, Keith would be making a headman pass the other way with some clean air in front of him.
So
So
then, yeah, we're seeing them the same. The the next question, I was going to ask you your least favorite Oiler, but I think we're going to pass on that. It's Christmas. Let's not go
okay.
there. Let's not go there tonight. Oilers MVP, Bruce. I've said my vote right now would be for Leon Draisaitl. Who would you vote for? Oilers
Uh,
MVP.
I'm going to go with the other guy,
Okay.
Connor McDavid, and it's close. I mean, it's wonderful to have two players that are so good as those two top two scorers in the league again. And I mentioned all the different things that Leon does. Uh, I think what McDavid does that sets him a little bit apart is uh, he he soaks up the most top level competition. I think the other team's game plan to stop McDavid, and then the challenge for Dave Tippett and the Oilers uh, is to best deploy the other players against the weaker opponents because McDavid is getting the top defense pair, the top checkers, and he's winning that battle, not by as much as I frankly would like, but I mean, he's just a constant play driver and scoring chance creator, and I think getting better as a defensive player. Still the odd issue here and there, but he's I think his two-way game is picked up, and I mean, he's the face of the team, and so I will pick him by a minuscule margin over your guy, just so we can have a discussion here.
Yeah, I'll pick Leon Draisaitl by the length of his hockey blade over Connor McDavid's length of his hockey blade. It's just a bit ahead. Actually, that's quite a bit ahead if you go by the hockey blades. um,
Cudgel.
I like Leon's, and as much as I criticize Leon's defense, I like his. I think he's been a better defensive player this year than McDavid, and their offense is pretty close. So I have to give Leon the edge because of that. As great, I mean, there's no better attacker in the NHL than Connor McDavid, and I actually don't think it's that close, even though the point scoring race is close. I think he's amazing, although Leon is amazing too. All right, Bruce, the last question on our list. What is the top, if you had to say right now, so you can't say like this could change or I'm uncertain. You got to say right now, if the if the Oilers, what is their top trade need? Now you can project into the future, but you have to pick right now what you think it's going to be or what you think it is. What do you think it is based on everything you're seeing so far?
I'm still looking at 3C and thinking that's a spot that we have not filled to satisfaction for a long, long time. And I mean, maybe that's a trade they can actually make internally into the sense of let's let's look at Ryan Nugent-Hopkins objectively and say, well, he's not really pushing the envelope as an offensive player, and his pay grades come down a little bit, that he's actually not out of line with some of the elite 3Cs on other teams. Maybe it's time to reset and to go 1, 2, 3 with those 3 players, and surround them with the right balance of the wingers, which is a little bit more depth in the winger department. Um, but otherwise, Ryan McLeod is young, Derek Ryan is old. Who do you have that's in the heart of their career that's ready to soak up those big minutes? And as mentioned, my unpleasant surprise earlier in the year is that they still haven't solved that problem, which is more unpleasant than a surprise. But it's time it got solved.
It's asking a lot of Colton Sevier to do it. I mean, I think he might actually fill in as a 4C and get the job done. He's like, in terms of I could have mentioned him, but CC's a more important player. But Sevier has been a huge surprise to me. He's their new Matt Hendricks and is really coming on for this team. So you kind of sold me. I've been hesitant on the Nugent Hopkins idea, but just looking at his even strength scoring on the dynamite line, he ain't getting it done. He hasn't got it. He didn't get it done with McDavid. He didn't get it done with Draisaitl. Maybe the thing is to put some pressure on him to be the driver of a line and step up for this team. Because I remember when he was put at center in the 4th game against Winnipeg, he had his best game ever in the playoffs for the Edmonton Oilers. He really was strong at center. And it was because he was, twisting that throttle a little harder. He was taking more responsibility, working harder, and playing a grittier game. And maybe thrusting him into the 3C role is exactly what he needs at this point to say, listen, buddy, you've got to find a way here to become a plus player at even strength. And we're gonna give this a go because it's a big need on the team. We need someone to do this. And we think you can do it. And I actually think he can do it. I think he could be the 3C. He's a very smart hockey player. He's a very skilled hockey player. So it's going to come down to, I don't know what's going on in his head in terms of his even strength play. And I don't, but I do think he's someone, my read of him is he's a very responsible person and he's willing to do a lot for the team. And if you asked him to shoulder this responsibility, step up for the team in this role and kill it, be the best 3C there is in the NHL, put that challenge to him, he could probably, he might be able to do it and get the right, there's lots of wingers now. There's more wingers than they've had in the past, and you can trade for wingers more easily. There's also Dylan Holloway if he can come back from injury. So maybe I've been hesitant because I don't like him as 2C. I don't think he's up to it on the attack. And but at 3C, when there's a little less pressure on, where his fundamental role will be to cover off great attackers, play solid defense. Yeah, I think there's a chance, and then chip in with the odd point, 1.3 per 60 even. Which is what he's gotten so far. For a 3C, if you're shutting him down on defense, that cuts it. That cuts it. So I like that idea, Bruce. I like it.
Well, he has been playing plenty of center. I mean, that game in Winnipeg wasn't out of the ordinary in that he winds up at center every time the coach pairs up Connor and Leon, which is a lot. And frankly, it's a default in-game adjustment that the coaching staff does first and foremost every time they're in a situation in a game. They just automatically seem to pair up Connor and Leon. I'm at the point, because the pairing has not been all that effective this year, certainly not as an outscoring duo. I'm at the point where let's save that for the shift after the power play. I can see the reasoning in that, but let's go with the power 1-2 down the middle. Because when Nuge does play 2C, he usually winds up with Hyman and Yamamoto typically on his line. And Hyman's a good scoring winger, and Yamamoto is a first-round draft choice with a history of scoring, and the three of them together do squat like they never score.
I wonder
if they put Connor and Leon together, they better score because the second line isn't going to, and the third and fourth line are
Yeah.
never going to. So, it's really putting all your eggs in one basket. And I kind of like maybe thinking it's time is to go 1, 2, 3 with those guys and stack up the guys, the Puljujärvi, who we haven't mentioned yet, and he's been I think a very pleasant, I'm surprised, but growth in that player. Zach Hyman, Fogel, you do have some wingers that you can pair these guys up with. Uh, Maybe it's time to go that way because we're 5 years now into this. Uh, Three coaches deep in this business of Leon with Connor some of the time and not some of the time, and how much further ahead is the team? Maybe it's time to sort of reset and let's go with instead of a top six, let's really focus on going with the top nine with those three guys as your kingpins on each of the three lines.
So is your trade suggestion 3C still then? Are you going with Nuge
Yeah,
there?
well, it's an internal trade or it's an external trade, but they gotta fix that problem. And I sort of threw the Nuge thing out there as an alternative to making a trade to get such a player, which is damn hard to do at any time, but especially in season. People aren't just sort of dangling 3Cs out there and saying, "Here, take my guy." I mean, you might be able to find a Pajot the way the Islanders did from the Senators a couple of years ago, and they paid dearly for him, and then they paid dearly to extend him. But I mean, to get that caliber of player, they don't come cheap. I mean, the Nuge contract is actually not that far out of line from the Pajots and the Danos and the Gourds of the NHL that are elite quality 3Cs.
Yeah, so I was going to pick 3C as well, but since we've
Mhm.
kind of thoroughly discussed that,
Okay.
I'll go with the goalie.
Okay.
And this is it's the other obvious thing. If Mike Smith doesn't come back, they need a goalie.
Yeah.
And what are the chances of Mike Smith coming back and being the player he was last year? I'll say through a playoff run, through a playoff run in the regular season and the playoffs, it's probably about 30 to 40% chance that he's that guy, that he gets over his injuries. That's not high enough, really. When you have a team that can compete for the cup, and now you could go with Skinner and Koskinen behind him, and that's a pretty big risk, though. So I'll say goalie. And of course, in this situation, we'll know more in a month and a half with Smith.
Right.
We will see if he can come back after Christmas here. And it's been waiting, and it's starting to be more and more doubtful, frankly, that he's going to come back. But we'll see. There's still time. And he was fantastic last year. Maybe he can crank it up again. And he's such an electric, charismatic player. The team's completely different when he's on the ice. It's a much more fired up team. I think he's their leader, and it would be great if he can be that. But if not, they need another goalie, and they need it more than anything else by far. So I'm going to say that's their top need, and maybe not that difficult to fill it. There's always, you might have to give up a first pick, but you could get a really good goalie because there's always teams out of the playoffs that have goalies. So we'll see what happens there. All right, Bruce. I think we've done our list.
Okay. Well, we didn't have to do our least favorite, though. I'm good with that on Christmas Eve.
Me
Let's
too.
save our criticism for when we have games to discuss again, hopefully sooner than later. But the jury remains out on that score as well after 3 games postponed this week. Would not surprise me in the least to have a couple more put off right after Christmas.
I wouldn't mind given that the Oilers will be without Darnell Nurse, Puljujärvi, who else?
Huge.
Nuge, Lagesson. If they come back,
Keith.
Keith. So
That's a
yeah,
lot.
they're missing a lot of regulars. So if there's one more game put off, that certainly works for me. I don't know if Zach Hyman's ready or not, but we'll find out, I guess. And if there isn't Oilers, we'll have the World Junior Tournament.
We hope.
Watch. Well, I think, is there a COVID test? Positive test?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I heard, and I never got the details. I just heard somebody yesterday there was a positive test, and one of the pre-tournament games that was to be played yesterday got canceled. I've been running around doing Christmas type things, so I haven't really got the full story there, other than there was concern that COVID had reared its ugly head.
Yeah, and if there's, I think we know a couple things for sure about Omicron, that it's far more contagious than the previous variants, and we don't know to the extent that it's less lethal than Delta, but we know that it's less lethal at this point. But I'm just seeing if there's any news that I can quickly call up here. Czech Republic and Switzerland game canceled, exhibition game. So if it's the Omicron, I think it's safe to say now that there was Omicron transmission in NHL games. Seems like there's a high correlation, I'll put it that way, Bruce, between NHL teams playing each other and Omicron outbreaks, it seems to me. So that probably happened. Alrighty, Bruce, let's leave it there for the pre-Christmas podcast. Merry Christmas to you, Bruce. Merry Christmas to all Cult of Hockey listeners, to the faithful. Bruce, thanks for talking.
All right. Merry Christmas to you, David, and to all the listeners. Thanks for listening.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.